Welcome to SawaTalks, the podcast where women share real corporate stories, break barriers, and grow together across borders, bridging ideas between East and West. Each episode, I invite an inspiring guest to discuss transnational challenges and explore actionable insights. Today, we're talking about
automatically, when you're at work, there's not a lot of women. There's not a lot of women in management positions. You need to be the ally of the other by default. So when a woman enters the room, when she starts working at your company, when she takes on a project, by default, immediately your reaction should be, I'm going to support her.
I'm your host, Samia Jameh. Yalla, let's get started. Hello, Samantha.
Hi.
How are you today?
Tired after a long day of work, but I'm very happy to be here and to just refresh the mind with you.
I'm so glad to have you with us. Before we dive in, could you introduce yourself and share something you'd like our SawaTalks audience to know about you?
Yeah, so my name is Samantha. I'm in Japan now for 10 years. I've been working mainly for Japanese companies, so that's kind of the specificity of my profile. I am originally from France, from the south of France. And my day job is to be a salesperson, quite simply saying. I also double in events management. And by night, I'm a podcaster. So kind of the same as you. I have a podcast called Femin Tokyo, which is a podcast that allows me to speak with Japanese women or minorities and to talk about the society of Japan and to exchange with them on their point of view. So I kind of do both.
It is a great podcast, and I'll be sharing a link later on for our audience to be able to listen to the great stories you're capturing, and then we'll all learning from your experience. As part of our SawaTalks tradition, I invite each guest to select one Japanese concept, or two sometimes, that resonates with their professional journey. So I'm curious to know, which concept have you selected?
Yeah, so I thought about it, and I like to do things a little bit unusually. So I picked one that is quite negative. It is, we call it the gaman suru. And gaman suru in Japanese, it means to take on yourself, to take onto yourself in order to accomplish something. So for example, when you ride a train, and if you know Tokyo, you know that the rush hour is quite intense, there is a mindset of gaman suru for the train. So you're going to push yourself in it, and you're going to push people, and you're going to be pressed on all parts, and it's very hard. And during the summer, it's very hot, and it's very stressful. But gamansuru. Gamansuru is really to endure and to use your patience and to use your willpower to overcome a situation. And I picked that one when I thought about your question, because I do think that it is in the majority, it's quite negative. Because the toxicity of that message is to say that even if you suffer, just push through and accomplish what you have to accomplish for the sake of the group. And I did it on purpose, because I don't try to make it positive. I don't think it can be something that is positive. I think it's quite toxic, and it's very here and present in the Japanese business and corporate culture. And I think we need to know that it exists, and we need to understand that a lot of our colleagues and a lot of our superiors are following unconsciously that mindset of gamansuru, toriyaezu gamansuru.
How is the gamansuru different from the gambare perspective?
Gamansuru really has a layer of, it is tough and I need to do it. So gamansuru, for example, you would say that if you need to go to the toilets, you're gonna try to keep yourself from having to go gamansuru. Or you're very hungry and you want to eat gamansuru, even though I'm hungry, I'm going to keep myself from eating. Gambaru is a bit more fun. It can be toxic as well, actually, so it's a good point. But Gambaru, if we just really compare the two of them without any context or anything, Gambaru is a bit more positive. It's like, you have a time at work or at school, you have a test coming up, gambare, Gaman is really telling you there's a tough situation and you need to overcome it.
I would love to understand and get into your story, where you can share any specific moment where you faced any challenge. And I think this would be related to the gamansuru perspective.
Obviously, over 10 years of work in Japan, I've had my fair share of challenges and how I overcame it. So it could really take me about 8 hours of podcast to tell you all about that. So to keep it short, I want to take something that's a bit more recent. And I think one of my biggest challenge currently that I have at work anyway is the fact that my company is very Japanese still, but it has been bought by a UK company, and that was 2 years ago. And the shift is very painful because now the boss, the headquarters, is British, and the Japanese company is very Japanese, meaning by that the workplace, the people, the mindset, the processes. It's a company that has almost 100 years of existence, so it's not a new company. And the UK headquarters, on top of that, it's huge what they're trying to do, right? Because they're very here every day in our work life, because Japan, for my company, is very active. It's an intense market, and they know they have money to grab, so they want it. And they're trying to understand what's going on in Japan. And the Japanese work culture is so unique, so different, and so difficult to bridge and to try to understand that their struggle right now is to try to understand what's going on. And the other side of the struggle, my Japanese company, my teams, my colleagues, is that they try to make peace with that British headquarters that's asking for details, asking for new ways of doing things, even though it's not really adapted to them. It's not adapted to the Japanese process.
So they're not speaking up on what specificities are in Japan from a cultural perspective.
They try. They definitely try, and that's where something like your tool Sawa could really be helpful for them. They're definitely trying. They send people. They send their some of their teammates to Japan for a week, 10 days. But the reality of things is that it takes more than a week to understand Japan. There are some strategic mistakes that I think personally are being taken, like choosing to only mingle with the leadership, for example. I think that's a critical mistake they're making. They should definitely try to mingle more with the rest of the company, the colleagues, the people who make things happen on the field, right? So that's definitely one of the mistakes. But then you have the language, you have the work style, you have the fact that Japan is very low in terms of immigration and foreigner workforce. So there's always a kind of freeze moment when we have to interact with foreigners here in Japan. I've been here for 10 years and I still see the freeze, the immediate reaction of saying, oh, gaikokujin, and the immediate freeze of being like, okay, is the language is going to be okay? And then when they see I speak Japanese, then the freeze go away and they're like, okay, she speaks Japanese, we're okay. But it still happened for someone like me who's been here for 10 years and who speaks fluent Japanese. So for someone who's just coming for a week, the freeze is tenfold, So they definitely try. But at the end of the day, it's a corporation, it's a company. They're here to make money. They are willing to understand Japan, but to the extent that it brings in money. Yeah. So it's a struggle.
And how is this impacting you?
For me is that obviously I serve as a bridge in between the headquarters and the US, because we also have my company in the US who's really stepping in a lot. I serve as a bridge between the foreigners and my Japanese colleagues. But the problem with a profile like mine, where I can speak 3 languages, including Japanese, and I've been here in Japan for 10 years, so I understand a lot of their unsaid work culture, is that depending on the situation, I'm on the bad guy's side or I'm on the good guy's side. So they're very happy to consider me part of the Japanese team when I serve my purpose and when I save the day and when I'm here to help. But whenever they can put me in the group of the gaikokujin, of the foreigners, they're very happy to forget that I know Japan very well and that I'm under the same work contract as them. I have the same vacations as them. So sometimes I can feel that I'm the enemy because I'm a foreigner. And they forget that I speak with them every day in Japanese. They forget that I speak right now in Japanese with them. All of that is unconscious, obviously. So I think for me, that's my biggest challenge. The second challenge would be just to explain both sides, to explain why foreigners think a certain way, why Japanese think a certain way, and the frustration that sometimes I am able to explain it, but the other party is not interested, or there's no solution. I think all of that is definitely It's a challenge when you're in an environment that doesn't have room to have those discussions. My company is very always tending to emergencies and part of the sales team. So sales is very fast, very aggressive. We don't have time to sit down and to understand what's going on and to be careful of everybody's feelings. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, all of those questions can only happen in an environment where people, resources, and money are available. And sometimes some companies just don't have that, don't have the luxury of that. So that's definitely my challenge.
I feel you, and I really understand how sometimes you need to explain situations when sometimes you just don't want to explain it. I mean, it's not part of your job. You have a job description that is to close your target. So you're not here to do the bridge work. You're not even recognized for doing so from your career, the performance perspective, I assume. You're bringing in a very important topic on diversity and inclusion because everyone from a minority, and then you know the topic inside out. Anyone from a minority, whenever they're being included or asked to join the club to dance, they feel like they have to do the extra mile and go again to do the bridge. But why? Why have this on your shoulder?
Mm-hmm. It's always a work, right? That's the thing. As a minority, and it's weird for me to say because I'm a white woman, so usually I wouldn't be part of a minority except maybe as a woman. But in Japan, since the majority of Japanese people is the ethnicality of it is Japanese, I am considered a gaikokujin, a foreigner, so a minority. And it is sometimes tiring to have to be the one to always justify yourself, and sometimes to have to really speak it out loud to say, by the way, I'm not the bad guy here. I had to say that in Japanese quite a few times to kind of diffuse the tension, make them laugh a little bit, and remind them that there's no such thing in a company as an enemy or anything. But sometimes I had to say in Japanese, chinami ni teki janai desu yo. It's like, I'm not the enemy here. Don't forget, we're part of the same company. I'm part of your team, your department. So don't forget that. And then I always say that in a very playful way so that they don't take it wrong. But sometimes, it's you take the hat, right? Is that because as the foreigner, and they associate me very unconsciously and very quickly with the foreigners who come from the UK or the US who don't speak Japanese, I understand the immediate, link that they make between us. So sometimes it's difficult to have to be like, let's calm down.
I fully feel you. And I'm in situations I have to justify all the geopolitics just by being there. I would love to understand how the Japanese concept you have selected have helped you navigate or overcome these kind of challenges.
For me, the Gamansuru is a very interesting one. I have a very personal relationship to Gamansuru because it is surprising the group pressure. The strength of the group pressure. And Japan has taught me that. It has taught me that as much as you think that you have strong beliefs, as much as you think that you're going to cut off your work and your PC and your phone at 6 p.m., sometimes the environment, the context, and the group pressure is just going to show you that you cannot. And the Gamansuru is linked to that because it is really, I think it's definitely something from maybe an older generation, but it still bleeds through because it keeps on, it's still there in the society. The Gamansuru attitude helped me understand my colleagues and also influenced me because I absorbed that Gamansuru when sometimes I shouldn't have, especially when you work in sales or in events management. Events management, it means long hours. It means sometimes, some days, you would finish at 11 p.m., and I remember that I had multiple events where I would finish at 10, 10:30, 11. And it would be done. Everything is done. My job is done. I'm a salesperson. I'm here to be the bridge on the day to make sure everything goes well. My job is not to clean the room after that, for example. There's a staff for that. A staff that's paid for that and who's going to have the taxi paid for them in order to go home and everything. And the group pressure of not wanting to bother them and the Gamansuru spirit, until the end, when it's be together, and this still triggered me into staying even after that, even though I was on the field since 7 a.m., And yet, even though that my job was done, the customer was gone, I would still take on the additional task of helping my colleagues clean up the room because Gamansuru, gaman shinai to ikenai, And because they're still here and we're a group and we're a team and we need to get together, Gamansuru is a very tricky one because it holds a lot of Japanese companies together. It holds a lot of parts of the Japanese society, but it can be very detrimental to yourself and to a lot of people. And in a country where I feel like the burnout is really, increasingly happening from what I hear around me or from what, a lot of clinics are reporting, the Gamansuru spirit really needs to be analyzed. And I think it needs to be countered. I think that, there are some good things that should be kept in every cultures, but there are some aspects of that culture that are just pushed so much to the extreme that it needs to be thought about as a leader of a company.
And we feel it from very early ages. The group pressure is taught in schools. I've been studying the Tokatsu mindset and how they're influencing the group consciousness at early ages. And it is there. So we're belonging to the same group. It has a lot of positive things of putting team cohesion, to have everyone coming together and being helpful, being there, ensuring that the wa is still the wa. But sometimes we just want to scream the wa, we're not in there. Mm-hmm. And yes, in burnout is also increasing in organizations, especially for everyone and mainly for women, especially if they are in a male-dominated industry where they feel the extra pressure. And if you add the hat of the inclusion or the minority, you're having an extra hat where you're bridging, need to justify others. So I completely feel the importance of going through this and having a clear message from top management where they need to be aware of that. And I feel that there is not much awareness that being happening. We've been doing a lot of work with organizations in cross-cultural understanding. Usually when they're doing initiatives, it's only about having a training that explains that we're high context, low context, and everyone is speaking with these keywords that doesn't resonate really with the culture. So, and when they're here to apply it, they don't have the patience to be there to understand. So having a lens from a cultural perspective is extremely important. So thank you very much for bringing this out. We have the first part where we discuss about barriers, definitely. And then the second part of the podcast is we love to have a kind of a solutions, looking for the small, bright light where we can find it and share it across. So for women who might be facing similar challenges, whether in Japan or anywhere in the world, what advice would you give them? Is there one practical step or thing they can take to move forward?
That's a very important question to have, because it's one thing to describe problems, but it's another thing to find solutions. And I think that when I do that all the time, when I speak with women about the difficulties they have at workplace, I would say there are a few concrete actions you can take that are going to make your life so much easier. The first thing that I think you need to do as a woman in a company is to be the ally of other women. It's very hard to do because we are in systems that are based upon patriarchy. So we have been taught, women, transgender women, cisgender women, we have been taught to become the competition of each other. So it is in our system, that's how we were raised. We have to be aware of that, and we have to counter it. We have to automatically, when you're at work, there's not a lot of women in management positions. You need to be the ally of the other by default. So when a woman enters the room, when she starts working at your company, when she takes on a project, by default, immediately your reaction should be, I'm going to support her. A clear example of that would be a few months ago, even though I was myself very new at the company that I work for right now, a woman joined us. And when I joined, my team was very low in numbers. It was very complicated. It was a very hard time. So no efforts was really made in order to make me feel welcomed. And my first day was actually hell. And when she joined, I thought to myself, it's going to be different for her. Her first day, she's going to have a welcome lunch. I'm going to show her where the restroom is, because no one taught me where the restroom is. After a few hours, I had to kind of find it. It's dumb, but it's important. Your first day should be comfortable. Yeah. When she joined, I thought, okay, it was like that for me. It's not going to be like that for her. Whatever happens next, whatever, if later on you discover you don't have the same values, she doesn't work with the same ethics as you, you don't have the same systems of working, it's fine. The first immediate reaction by default should be to be the ally of minorities and women. And then after that, if the paths need to separate, that's fine. So that's my first concrete advice that I can give to any woman. If you do that, it's just going to make your life so much easier. You're going to find the nakama, nakama, that's another Japanese concept, but the comrades, the people who are going to stick with you. So that's one first thing that I can say, like in terms of individual. I think that we can give as many advices as we want to women and minorities, but I think really the advices should go to the one who have the power. And the ones who have the power in Japan especially are men, Japanese men. What they need to make sure of is to stop putting the pressure and the responsibility on minorities. One thing that I absolutely despise in Japanese companies is the habit of creating a mentoring network for women. Is to say, the one way we're going to help women getting to management position is by telling them to mentor other women because they lack ambition, because they don't know how to become management. And that's a mistake. There's already not enough women in companies. If you burden them with even more tasks that they've never asked for, they're going to resent that. And I don't think that the main barriers, the main problems of women in the workplace are coming from women. I think it's coming from the system. I think it's coming from unconscious bias. I think it's coming from mansplaining, from a lot of things like that. Yes, a woman mentoring network can help, but it shouldn't be the only thing. And it should be definitely based on someone who can volunteer and has the time for it. But on the side of that, you need to have other things that are more concrete and that are not saying to women, you are not enough. You're not a good mentor. You're not a good manager. You're not aiming high enough, because it's not true.
This is I love the way of changing things. And it's right, because we're always pushing in organizations to have many initiatives, many leaderships. So we're adding onto the plate of the women leading the change. And by them also doing their self-leadership and reflecting and being in that position is a challenge by itself. So asking her to be a role model, asking her to speak up, asking her to speak at events is extra work that is being done. I've been approached many times with the SAWA framework on a way to create new initiatives for women by women. So this is really adding, like you said, extra burden for women to make sure that they're going out and they're not being able to reach to the top. And what we need more is maybe the allies sponsoring other women, not necessarily mentoring them because they know, but on the performance table, when we're discussing about performance, about raises, about promotions, we need to have people who will write the woman's name on the paper for the next level. Usually they think about her when giving her an initiative, not necessarily when promoting the next manager. Thanks a lot for raising this. At SawaTalks, we believe in the power of learning across generations. Has learning from someone older or younger than you ever changed your perspective or approach?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, and it's definitely not an easy thing to do, because we all generations grew up with different problems from the other generations. So it's not easy, but it's definitely happened quite a few times for me, especially in a culture like Japan, where the Confucius mindset is so here. The respect for the hierarchy, right? The respect for we call them the senpai, the people who have more seniority and experience in the company. It's something that's quite big. So my first company, especially my Japanese first experience that I've had here, without the help of my colleagues who are older than me in the company, I would have done nothing. They taught me everything. They taught me everything from the Japanese work culture to the Japanese language. That was also thanks to them. There's really a mindset here, a way of thinking that they will take you with them. Literally, I did shadowing for quite a few weeks with a senpai of mine. She took me to a lot of her customers' meetings, to a lot of events, and they have no problem telling to their customers, sorry, she's on the side with me today because she's learning, she's on the spot, she needs to see how it's going on. I learned everything I know in Japan and the Japanese work culture, the business, everything. I learned it from my senpai, from really people who were older than me who had more experience in the company. So that's a critical point. On the other side, right now, because I'm 35, I'm definitely getting to an age where younger people now reach out to me, especially about Japan. And just before doing this episode today, I was talking to a young woman who's 23, and she is writing a thesis about, about Japan, the work culture, the diversity, equity, inclusion, everything. And we had a great conversation, both of us, for an hour, talking about what it is to be a woman here in the workplace. And her questions, the way she was phrasing her questions and the contents of her questions really taught me what the next generation is worrying about. And it's not numbers. I was really struck with her and other people that I've talked with before, not necessarily super interested. They are in money, in the salary, for example. It's obviously there. They know it's very important and we need that to live. But more than that, now they're starting to look a bit more about the support that the company can provide, and what are the ethics of the company. So the new generation and the interactions that I have with them is really kind of teaching me that they are already having different worries than us. I'm going to talk to a French school in a few weeks as well about Japan. And I'm willing to bet that I'm going to get out of here again, feeling very, very much like, not like there's a gap, but more like they are on another kind of sphere, they're ahead of time.
They have new perspective. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's a healthy perspective to challenge everyone's mindset. And we're in these years, we will have the multiple generations on the same workplace. So I'd be very curious to see. And one of the objectives of this podcast is really to bringing some ideas on how to find some practical steps for organization to leverage this dynamic, and to how can they encourage learning and collaboration between these different generations. Would you have any examples or any ideas on how can we leverage this learning from organization? Because we feel that we belong to different spheres, and this is something I get from different top managers who are interviewing from a performance review or interviewing new joiners. They feel that we're not valuing the same things. Different generations do value different things, and it's difficult for them to manage. So do you have any ideas on how can we leverage this synergy?
Well, I think it really, again, it comes from the leadership. I think that a leadership who truly values the new people coming into the company, especially the young generation. You know how Japan is very, it has a very strict structure, right? Every April, the fresh generation comes out of university, and then there's a batch of new hiring, which is, it's not questioning if that's a good idea or not, but the result of that is that you have a massive group of new people, new young people coming into companies. At my company, we just hired 133. The consequence of that is that they come in as a mass, as a group, and they are not seen individually. That is just the system that is in place in Japan. That's just how it is. It's not a critic of it. The fact that this is happening tells us that when they come in, we need to pay specific attention to them. We need to stop treating them as a group, all dressed the same way. You've seen it before. They all have the same costume, white and black. They all dye their hair black again. If they had it dyed before, they remove the piercings. They put heels, for the woman. So they're all dressed the same. We see them in the streets in April. This is the unconscious message, is that they come in as workforce and manpower, and they are just seen as that. And I think we need to stop that. We need to see them, each of them individually, and see the profile that they bring in, see their dreams, see what they want to do. One of the toughest thing I've ever seen in Japan at my first company, again, I saw a welcome speech of one of the leadership, an old Japanese guy. And he was one of the heads of the company. And he welcomed those young people. I think there was maybe 30 of them in the room. It was so strict, by the way. They all had to sit very stiff, not crossing their legs, quite a distance from the back of the chair to prove that they were paying attention. An office lady was standing on the back to shake them if they were starting to fall asleep. I swear to you, this is all real. And the speech of that guy, we call them, in Japanese, we call them Gigi, so like the grandpas, right? That guy who's so disconnected from them, who really doesn't have the same problems as them. His speech was so harsh. He was like, you're all coming in today in this great institution that was my company at the time. And he was like, but now the young life, the fun, the everything that can be the case for a lot of students in the Japanese universities, now it all stops. Now this is the real life. Now you need to be focused. You need to be majime, serious. He made one girl cry. There was like one girl on the front row that started crying from it. He cornered her. He was like, "You're crying right now?" And I think she answered something like, "It's just the allergies, the cafuncho." No, she was crying because it was too harsh. We need to stop that. We need to stop. And like, this is a very extreme example. My company, because my company is the first one I worked for is very traditional. I'm aware of that. The less harsh version of that is still that we take those young people, those bright minds who have a lot of idea, energy, and passion. We treat them as one group. We assign them to jobs that are not necessarily what they want to do. And we need to stop that. We need to be with them. We need to put mentors. That would be a good time to have mentors to follow how they're doing, for the first weeks, because it's a big shift and a big change. And I think if we start doing that and if we start seeing them, it's going to help a lot.
Yeah, so kind of an individual onboarding program for
would be better.
Each one. Yeah. Japan has a specific onboarding, especially with the batch recruitment, but it does happen in different places in the world where onboarding is very individualized. And I feel this is a good practice as per your experience also, and from what I've seen from different corporates. So the onboarding, like you said in the beginning, the first day should be a nice way of welcoming and including people to the culture and having them aligned with the values. You spoke about the welcome speech. Is there any initiatives that you feel or you heard about from a diversity and inclusion? I know that you do a lot of work on the unconscious bias. Any initiatives that you feel helped go beyond the unconscious bias or change the mindset? Because we hear a lot about training.
So there are, I think, just here out of just like on the spot, I would mention two things that I could advise to leaders in companies. One thing is, don't underestimate the importance of the communication style that Japan has, which is the time outside the company. I know it's complicated for Western people because we're taught that, family is a very valued time and that, we should protect it at all costs. But the truth is that in a lot of traditional Japanese companies, time outside work is linked to colleagues with, for example, the nomikai. And as a leader, you can't underestimate that. If you don't go to nomikai, you're not gonna be part of the team. And that's complicated, but you don't have to be there. They're absolutely tolerant on, for example, someone who would be like, after an hour, sorry, I had a bit too much to drink, I'm gonna head home. As long as you're here at least at the beginning to create the bond, right? This is something that a lot of, I think, Western leaders are forgetting about. The second advice I would give to companies is, we touched on it a little bit before, saying stop putting the pressure on women. Don't hesitate to give us tools. Inside of the company, you need to give your employees tools so that they can work better by themselves. Two examples I can give that are very concrete is, the first thing is that you should have a database. You should have something that's created in your company on your network that people can just go into and type, okay, how do I file out my commute expenses? And just so that you don't have to ask anyone, you can just find that on you. This is so important. So many companies don't have that, even though the files are somewhere, So first thing, you should work on that. It's so helpful. The second thing is, I love the idea of doing sort of workshop about concrete concepts. You mentioned before unconscious bias. I would love to see companies doing more of that. Teaching everybody who wants to learn about it, by the way, not just women or minorities. Anyone who wants to hear about unconscious bias, mansplaining, microaggressions, this kind of stuff. A lot of people don't understand what it's LGBTQI+. What are all the letters into that, But it's tricky because in order to do that, you need to invite people whose job it is to explain that. Don't invite a whatever guy, a whatever woman who doesn't know what they're talking about. A classic mistake a lot of companies do is that to talk about women issues, they invite a woman. They're like, okay, woman, box checked. No, you need to invite someone whose job it is to explain those concepts and to explain the DEI. And there are a lot of companies who can do that. So I feel like if a company can do that, the employees are going to feel seen. They're going to feel like they're walking away with something concrete. They're going to be like, next time there's a Nihongo Jozu Desne happening in the face of a Gaikokujin or a foreigner. Nihongo Jozu Desne means you're very good at Japanese, and it's something that I hear 10 times a day. And it's a microaggression because, yeah, my Japanese is good. I live in Japan for 10 years, If people can understand that outside of a workshop, it's going to give them concrete tools, to handle their life at the company better. So I think that's a good one to keep.
As we wrap up, is there a quote, a book, or a daily habit that inspired you recently or that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think I thought about that one a little bit. And I think that one thing that I forgot too much recently when I was going through burnout at my company and when times were tough is the importance of, it's going to sound a bit silly, but the importance of sport. I just got myself recently back to boxing because that's my sport. It's boxing. I know in theory, I know that sport is very important and that you should do it. But really, I underestimated the impact it would have on my mind and on my body to get back to it regularly. When you're not doing well, when you have a tough time at work, when you have a tough time in general, try to kind of force yourself a little bit to go to sports, whatever sport is resonating with you. Not too long, if you feel like it's really not the time for you in your life to do that, then it's fine, put it on the side. But I felt that I think it was like a few weeks ago now that I really started getting back to it regularly, finding my gym again, my boxing gym again near my work. It just helps a lot more than what we think. It doesn't need to be calorie consuming to have to lose weight or put on muscles, just move a few minutes, a few whatever. It really helps, especially if you do a sport like boxing, for example, which is the reason why I'm not a big fan of the normal gyms. A sport like boxing, it's impossible to think of something else.
Otherwise, you'll get
you're gonna get hurt by your opponent definitely, but also even you don't have to fight someone. You can just like have sandbags, and if you're not focused on what you're doing right now, you're gonna hurt yourself. And the sensei, the teacher, is the first one to tell you that. It's like you need to be focused on what you're doing, or you're gonna hurt yourself. If you can find yourself a sport like that needs you to be focused, so. The gyms where it's repetitive, where you're doing, the Fred milk for like 30 minutes, if you're on your YouTube video, maybe. But I feel like a sport that really allows you to be inside of the movements that you're making, that you're doing, is a very good one.
It resonates a lot with me. I do horse riding.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly like you said, you cannot be unfocused. You cannot think of something else. Otherwise, you'll be on the floor.
You need to be present.
Yeah, you need to be present. And it is important to exercise. Sometimes we think of exercising like a way to get in a shape. But you're right, we need to take care of our mind by moving. So thank you so much, Samantha, for sharing your story and wisdom with us today.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
That's it for this episode of SawaTalks. Let's keep breaking barriers together. To find more about our guests and the topics covered, follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. You'll find the links in the description. This was your host, Sami Jameh. Thank you so much for listening.